52% of people are lonely. Being alone, physically alone for some time, is a very different reality from loneliness, which is a chronic condition actually. Particularly in the holiday season, we see higher levels of loneliness.
Why is loneliness specifically surrounded by so many difficult realities, meaning the feeling of shame, the feeling of embarrassment? How is that happening?
There's so much social stigma. We grow up believing that being together is the pinnacle of the goal, right, for all life. And the social reality and the social expectation is that you are included, that you have a family, a wife, a husband, friends, a social group, whatever it is. If you don't have that, you are acutely aware that you are outside of that social norm, and that doesn't work for anyone.
Where do adults make friends?
Having purpose together, shared purpose, creates ties, and those ties and that shared belief creates friendship. A friend you choose on your terms, on their terms, because of a shared energy or a shared passion or a shared outlook or something else that you share. It's a choice. And how empowering is that?
Welcome to another episode of Villa Podcast. This is the platform and the show where we discuss anything from organization and culture, marketing and media brand, all the way to personal growth and personal development. And as we are approaching a big holiday season, we decided to raise a very important and critical topic that is so underspoken. We're talking about loneliness during the holiday season. Feeling lonely during holiday season is a common experience for many people. It's the time often filled with joy and gatherings and celebrations. It can encourage the feeling of loneliness for many people, especially if you're not surrounded by friends or family. The best person to talk about loneliness is, of course, Mimi Nicklin, the empathy advocate. Mimi, welcome to the studio. Welcome to Pods. Welcome to Villa Podcast. And we're talking loneliness today.
Yeah, big topic.
It's a huge topic. Sometime back, I've heard that on your keynote, first of all, something that struck my mind, actually. 50% of us are lonely.
Yeah, 52.
In general.
52%, yes, globally, exactly. Each country has different levels, but as a global average, 52% of people are lonely. That means that they have a lack of connection in their life. Chronically lonely, Lara, like long term.
Loneliness is a pretty complex topic, and also probably the feeling. Like, I've read somewhere that actually every person comes into this world as a lonely person and will leave this world as a lonely person, right? Makes me cry, actually.
I know, that's awful, isn't it?
And at some point, it's okay to be lonely, not to feel probably lonely, but to be on your own, meaning to have time to reflect, to have time to think about what happened, to do what's next. But this is not toxic.
Yeah.
What we're talking about the toxic feeling of loneliness.
Yeah, it's a big difference between being alone and being lonely. You know, I think, as you touched on there, we can spend time alone. For me, as a working mum, and I travel a lot, and I'm constantly surrounded by people and noise and aeroplanes and all those things, sometimes being alone is a gift, like you said, to reflect, to have moments of calm, to actually digest things, you know, without all the external stimulus. But as you said, that being alone, physically alone for some time, is a very different reality from loneliness, which is a chronic condition, actually. And it's, as you said, you know, it's impacting 50% of us. There are 300 million people that don't have a friend. 300 million people without
That's a lot of people without a friend.
How sad is that?
It is. First of all, it's super sad. Second of all, I think the more mature we become, the more difficult it becomes to make friends, actually.
Yeah.
Could you tell me, what do you think about that? Like, why is it happening like that? Why, the more mature, the wiser, the smarter we become, it gets more difficult to actually connect with people.
I think time has a huge part in that. You know, how often people tell me, oh, I don't have time, Mimi. I don't have time to make friends. Or I don't have time to go out and see my friends. And I think that conversation is shifting. I've started to notice, in fact, Simon Sinek was talking about it recently on stage. There's a few people who have started now to talk about this value of friendship, the value of making time, right, to be together. So time is one of those things where we all have too little of it, you know, in life in general. But it's also something that we frame for ourselves. So for me personally, I now never use the word don't have time. I will say I haven't created time, or I won't create time. Because the thing about language is that it impacts your subconscious mind impacts your conscious mind. So if you say to yourself, I don't have time to see my friends, you won't have time to see your friends because you have told your conscious mind there is no time for that action. So I think time, or the perception of our time, is a huge part of that. I think confidence, shame, fear, all of these emotions have a huge role in it. So many people stay at home and they feel lonely. They know they're lonely. I write about this so much in my new book. They know it. They know they're lonely, but they are not willing to take that step to fix it. And that might be, as I said, because they feel shame, they feel embarrassed that they're lonely, or that they don't maybe have the friends that they used to, or that they've grown apart from them. You know, those that we had things in common with in our 20s or 30s may not be the same as in your 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, right, as you go through life. So shame has a huge role in there. Confidence. In the end, your loneliness, the only person that can fix that is you. You have to overcome it. And for many people, they just don't have the confidence. They think, well, what if no one likes me? What if they don't want me to come to the dinner? What if they invited me out of pity? What if I don't fit in? All of those sort of self-fulfilling realities which sit in our own minds and are most likely not in anybody else's minds. But we build them up to be so big that we think, well, actually, I'd rather just stay at home and be lonely than risk more embarrassment, more shame, discomfort, all of those things. And it is uncomfortable, right? Making new friends, you have to put yourself out there. But in the end, Lara, nothing wonderful ever came from a comfort zone. So
I agree. I absolutely agree. I just want to dig a little bit deeper into your, things that prevent people from taking an action and fixing probably one of the hardest feeling that anyone would probably admit, that feeling lonely is as hard as, feeling totally alone, without support, without someone to talk to. It's a super hard feeling. And yet people are not willing to take an action, as you mentioned. So out of your conversations and out of your sort of studies while writing a book, maybe you came across with some of the recommendations of what can people start with, especially when we are approaching a holiday season, and it's probably it's becoming so relevant for people to actually have some piece of advice in mind on how to get that out.
And you're right, particularly in the holiday season, we see higher levels of loneliness at this time of year. And unfortunately, we see higher levels of all of the negative consequences of that as well, including things like suicide, isolation, illness. When you are lonely chronically, and by that what I mean is long term, right? So you're lonely over an extended period of time, it impacts your body. We are pro-social species. So when we are isolated, when we are alone, we both emotionally but also physiologically do less well. So you will see suppression of the immune system, you will get more sick, you will find you're less able to heal, all kinds of impacts. You might feel higher levels of pain, discomfort, nausea, you might put on weight, impacts on sleep. So there's a whole plethora of realities that we see increase at a time of year when there is social pressure specifically to not be alone. And of course, in Christian and some Western cultures, Christmas might be that period, but it could be any festive season. It could be over Ramadan or Diwali or any other religious festival where we see families and people getting together, and we become acutely aware if we don't have that. So I think, I often say to people, as I touched on just now, the first step to fixing that is you. Because if you sit at home or anywhere and do nothing about it, no one else is going to fix that for you. And as you said, it's very difficult. It is very difficult to do that. But I would say the first thing that I would recommend for people is to actually name your loneliness. Many people feel it, but they don't want to admit it to themselves or anybody else. You know, I this morning, I did a keynote speech to an audience of about 200 people, all professionals. And when I ask them as an audience, and of course they're not looking at each other, they're looking at me, but I can see all of their faces. When I say to them, 52% of you, so half of you in this room are lonely, you can see the faces in the audience that recognize it, you know, and they kind of, often they look down, they don't want to admit it, they feel uncomfortable, they start to question it. Am I lonely? Am I one of the people she's talking about? That step of naming something is a critical step in overcoming it, because we can't fix what we don't know. And if you don't know that you're lonely, if you haven't owned it, how are you going to convince yourself, prepare yourself to go out and solve for that? So to meet new people, to make an effort to join a club or an association, to speak up. And for many people, that might be online, and that's fine. Obviously, I specialize in human connection, so I'm always going to encourage people to go out and be together. There's huge benefits physiologically, emotionally, mentally. But if you don't feel able, and if you are more comfortable to meet in a virtual world or on a chat room or on a social platform, it doesn't matter. You can overcome loneliness in many different ways. There's no one answer that, you know, one size fits all. That doesn't exist.
Why is loneliness specifically surrounded by so many sort of difficult realities, meaning the feeling of shame, the feeling of embarrassment, perhaps? How is that happening?
There's so much social stigma, Lara. We grow up believing, and for many good reasons, I might add, you know, as I said, physically, emotionally, for many good reasons, socially, that being together is the pinnacle of the goal, right, for all life. And as I said, for very good reason. There's a very good reason that we grow up believing that, because we do better together. My new book is about how belonging, empathy, leads to longevity. So that I literally wrote an entire book, 65,000 words, on why we need to belong and be together in order to survive. So there's many reasons why we grow up like that. But of course, when the social reality and the social expectation is that you are included, that you have a family, a wife, a husband, friends, a social group, whatever it is. If you don't have that, you are acutely aware that you are outside of that social norm, and that doesn't work for anyone. That, I think, is why the conversation in the workplace, for example, around inclusion is so critical. Because anybody who has an identity that doesn't fit within the mainstream normalized culture, which could be belonging at Christmas, being with other people, not spending Christmas alone, you live in fear of, but also alongside judgment. That might be your own, or it could be other people's. And there is, you know, obviously a whole lot of definitions around introversion and extroversion. But even if you are very happy alone, I'm quite happy alone sometimes. That doesn't take away from the need to be connected to others. And as you said, that kind of famous British, I don't know what it is, like metaphor around you're born alone and you die alone.
Yeah.
There is, of course, another way. You don't have to. We have to be born alone. You can't be born any other way. But I think for everyone, probably our greatest fear is to die alone. And when you read, which I have recently in research, the most common regrets for people who are on their deathbed, more time connecting with others, with their family, with their friends, is in the top 3 always, across culture, across language. People that are facing death, in their top 3 wishes, one of them is always, I just wish I had been with my people more.
Why is it so difficult to find your own people? And I have to admit, it's not easy, isn't it?
It's not easy. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of dating even, you know, how often we hear people that say, why is dating so difficult now? You know, I feel like maybe 40 years ago, it just was easier for people to find a life partner that they wanted to spend time with. Now, particularly women who speak more openly about it, or perhaps just because I'm a woman, but I hear from women all the time who have been dating for like 10 years and are still looking to find that person that, you know, that fits them, that they feel is the right person for the rest of their life. So why is it so difficult? I think for a couple of reasons. I think the diversification of our cities was wonderful, because diversity drives innovation and change and creativity and inclusion and wonderful things. But when we have somewhere like Dubai, that is so diverse. And there are so many microcosms of culture, whether that's where you come from, your home country. So, Spanish versus English versus Australian versus Pakistani culture, whether that's religious, whether it's status, whether it's shared experience. You have such a diversification of culture, it's very easy to get lost. Right? It's very easy to get lost in that. Where do I fit? Should I be with the people, like my countrymen, where I come from? Is that where I belong? Or should I hang out with the people that have children because I'm a mum? Or should I be going to networking events because I'm a CEO? So I should fit. It's not like the olden days when we grew up in our towns and cities. We knew those people.
Yeah, it was very predictable, right? And the society is predictable. The social sort of journey is more or less predictable, but I mean, it doesn't eliminate the social stigma that you have to sort of always comply to, and that doesn't actually eliminate the feeling of loneliness. But probably you're right, diversity is always a more complex area, because in the diversity you get lost, but you get more opportunities. It's all about how do you balance and how do you manage that. So diversity creates opportunities, but also creates a complexity of choice.
I think so. I think you have to be extremely intentional, really intentional to make friends, particularly if, and maybe there's people in our audience today that are here in Dubai who have traveled from their home country. You have to really want to make friends. You won't make friends staying at home and speaking to your friends, from wherever you've come from. So I think intentionality is really important. And there is a difference between acceptance and belonging. So in many diverse groups, maybe that's in the workplace, for example, we can have acceptance of many opinions, and that's wonderful. I work with organizations who have D&I policies, and they really make great intentional efforts to make sure that all voices are heard and everybody's acknowledged. That's a very good thing. But that is different from belonging. I can accept and acknowledge voices around a table and still feel totally alone. So that's where I think that complication comes from. And the solution to that, as far as I believe, sits in intentionality. You have to put yourself out there. You have to make an effort. One of the tips I always give people is to ask questions. It's a bit like dating again, right? If you're on a first date, you are forced to ask questions of each other, whether that's where did you grow up, or what do you like doing, or do you like dogs, or whatever it is, right, that you're asking. We don't often do that with our friends, so when you go on a kind of a friend date, right, and you're meeting a friend for the first time, that has to be an intentional decision. You have to show interest. And I think sometimes we have this huge fear that my answers might not be good enough, that moment of vulnerability. But actually is in that curiosity, which is fundamentally the path to empathy, by the way, understanding, shared understanding, is where you overcome what could be barriers, right? What could be things that keep us apart. And I always believe, and I say this, every week, that we are all more alike than we are different. But you have to find that, that shared desire, that shared love as mums, or of confectionery, or becoming a baker, or it doesn't matter what it is, right? But finding people that love what you love and have a connection over that, you have to find out. You're not going to get that really from an Instagram profile. You might get some of it, but unlikely to get all of it.
So it is a skill.
It's a skill. It is a skill, and it's a hard skill. And as I said, you have to really commit to it. And my mum used to always say to me, try again. You have to keep going. You might go, and I know because I've been an expat for nearly 20 years, you might go to 4 or 5 like women's dinners and not find your people and just think, this is hard work. I think I'll stay home next weekend, right? But if you don't keep trying, you won't find your friends. And then the alternative is that you are alone. So it's intention, it's commitment, it's consistency, and that desire to understand. In the world today, people need to be listened to. So if you can be that listener, you will endear people to you, and you will make significant effort to really sort of overcome some of that segregation.
I was going to ask actually, so where do people make friends? And we're talking about adults. I mean, we're not talking, young people. So you've got your universities, you've got your schools to make friends. We're talking about grown-ups. We're talking about generations that are probably getting to a stage where it is becoming really complicated to connect, to start belonging, right? To find your people. So where do adults make friends?
I think it depends on your life stage as well. I recently wrote a piece for the UK media. So if we start at the sort of older end of the spectrum, the piece I wrote was for retirees, particularly women in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s. Their role of making friends is a very different time of their life. Many of them in this piece that we were writing had lost their husbands or their partners. So were alone for the first time, for some of them, bless them, in like 50 years. And there, as we said earlier, there's only two choices. You're either alone at home or you're not. So this piece was to address some of those concerns. And for women, I think if they're empowered to do so, if they find their confidence, you can find phenomenal friends in later life, because you don't actually have we talked earlier about these stigmas of the things that other people put on you when you were young. You should hang out with other mums, or you should hang out with the other wives of your husband's friends, right? And I think for many women, we spend many years hanging out at parties and events with our husbands' friends, wives or girlfriends, who actually we have nothing in common with except that the men are friends, So I think there's this very empowering time of life where perhaps your children have grown, perhaps you're with your husband or without, or your partner or without, but you have no sort of shackles or realities. You can now just make friends on your own terms. Where to do that? Outside of the home is the best place, but of course you can do it online. But I would say, joining clubs, joining societies, volunteering is a brilliant way to find friends. People find such innate joy in giving. That makes us human. The act of giving actually has a neurological impact on our brains. We are literally wired to get joy from sharing, from helping. That's why I always say to people, the question, can I help, is such a powerful question in neuroscience. So find something with other people that you want to help together, whether that's saving animals, dogs and cats and pets, or it might be children or other elderly, or a cancer centre. Being in service, having purpose together, shared purpose, creates ties. And those ties and that shared belief creates friendship. And I think the other thing is, Lara, and I literally spoke to someone about this yesterday, if we go down a generation, perhaps where we are, so women in their maybe 30s and 40s, we have still a lot of weight in the word friendship. So yesterday I met with a new friend who I had met at an event. She works in HR. So maybe one day she'll be a client. Could I call her an associate? It's a bit cold, but maybe. Could I call her a colleague? No, we don't actually work together. Can I call her a client? No, we're not actually doing anything together yet. So literally at this coffee date in Dubai yesterday, I said to her, well, maybe we can just be friends. And she's German. And she said to me, oh, Mimi, she said, I absolutely love that idea. She said, why don't people say that more often? Why do we have so many judgments on what a friend is? So I said to her, okay, cool. Let's be friends. Next time I come, let's have dinner. I'd love to meet your family. And let's take it from there. We don't have to be like best friends for life. We didn't grow up in the same country, town, or anywhere. We don't even know each other that well. But over that coffee date, we made a decision as two independent women. We quite like each other. We've got something in common. I would like to have dinner with you and your family when I come back. So let's be friends. How hard is that? But she said to me, no one, Mimi, has ever said that to me. Amazing.
It's a fascinating story and the situation, and I think I do have a judgment about friendship, probably. Unconscious.
Yeah,
I think that the best friend, they have to be so reliable, and I know it's unconscious bias, right? It's maybe it's a lot in our adult minds that prevent us from actually, first of all, admitting that we're not lonely as such. We're just not doing anything to connect further, or suggest something or offer something, or we're connected to people who don't want this, but we're missing out on the opportunity to connect to those who probably would be willing to build relationship, right?
Yeah.
So there are multiple, reasons if you're going deeper. I was going to ask you, do you think people are also stuck with not admitting that friendship is important if they are with a family, with kids, and you always have to find sort of, the reason. Why would you go out with a friend?
I know.
When you've got kids
I know.
to take care of, or when you've got your husband to actually spend time with and discuss something and talk, also build connection.
But it's a very different role, isn't it? I mean, I think, again, it comes back to this time, perception of time. For many women, I think there's a level of guilt, particularly, not only, but particularly if you're a working parent. I have that all the time. Again, there's so many things today, but somebody messaged me from my home country today, from Malaysia, where I live, asked me out for dinner on Thursday night. The first thing I thought was, isn't that wonderful? I mean, that's just a lovely message to get, when I'm running around town. But the second thing very quickly that I thought was, how am I going to, is that okay with my daughter? Can I put her to bed? Should I feel guilty? I haven't seen her today and yesterday because I'm here. I want to make sure that I do my motherhood duties first. Yeah. So there's a time reality, but there's also a guilt reality. I think that the recognition that each of those relationships is very different and you get different things from it is really, really important. Friends can be people you grow up with, people that knew who you were when you were 6, 7, 8, 15, 20, whatever. And like you said, there's a perception that is what makes a friend. But you know what, Lara, for me, I grew apart from many of my friends. Mm-hmm. I write about that in my new book as well. It's not something I'm proud of or happy about necessarily, but that was just my life. I grew up in the UK and I left 20 years ago. My entire adult life, the choices I've made, the children I've had, the life I've led has taken me away from my home country and I never go back. So keeping those friends is very hard. Do I wish I had kept more of them closer? Yes, I have a handful that are still very close to me. But that doesn't stop me being very comfortable and happy to make new friends like you, Lara, right? And I think, why are we so shy to ask that? Like back to this conversation yesterday, what's the worst she could have said to me? If I said to her, should we be friends? For sure, it's like a slightly unusual sentence, I think, but all they can say is yes or no, right? So that person could say, well, I'm not really comfortable with that. Okay, we won't be friends, no problem. But the chances are they're going to say yes.
Of course.
Because everybody wants friends. You don't have to be best friends forever, like my 6-year-old says, BFF, right? You just have to have people that you want to spend time with, right? That have a different role. The conversations you have with your husband versus your children versus your mum or your sister or your brother versus a friend is different. And the main reality, or the main differentiation there, is choice. Okay, we choose our husbands and wives, but we don't choose our families or even our children. We chose to have them, but we didn't choose that exact child, right? But a friend, you choose on your terms, on their terms, because of a shared energy or a shared passion or a shared outlook or something else that you share. Food, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's a choice. And how empowering is that?
It is very empowering, and it's more realistic than we tend to think about, right? We tend to think that it's so much more complicated to make friends, but in fact,
ask. Just ask. Right? I'm going to send this podcast to my new friend from yesterday, and I'm going to ask her to comment on it when this comes out. But just ask. I know it's awkward. Or maybe I should say, I know it can be awkward. I didn't feel awkward asking that yesterday. I just said it. And I'm going to say it to many more people. I'm inspired by my own action. But what could we do if we ask more people to be our friends, especially at Christmas?
I think, we're all surrounded by a lot of unconscious bias about like whether it is appropriate. I mean, I tend to actually be a little bit reluctant is the wrong word, a little bit conscious about sending another message over WhatsApp. I really tend to be afraid to bother people on WhatsApp, especially when there's a working day. And it doesn't matter. I mean, sometimes I just want to send a message, not because I want to say hi, but I'm offering something or whatsoever. I mean, I do tend to get those bias and those restrictions or those stigmas in my head and stand in the way of building a relationship. Speaking about that, so we mentioned all the places where adults can make friends, but we never mentioned the office life. Do you think this is the place where people can make friends and actually become friends?
Yeah, I think I've been thinking a lot about this recently, Lara. I think there's a huge amount of stigma and I'm trying to work out why. I haven't quite cracked that yet. I'm trying to look a little bit into the data. to the last maybe 40 or 50 years of the working world to work out why.
Yeah,
Have you got a good stat there?
I've got another stat which says 3 out of 10 employees feel they have a friend at work. Yeah.
Yes, that is true. 70% of people do not have any friends at work. But I'm wondering why. I think, again, a lot of it is to do with perception and just, you said bias or baggage around that. I think there's two ways to think about this. On the one hand, are we at work to make friends? No, we're at work to do our jobs, right? We're at work to do whatever it is that we've gone to work to do. So I don't think that the workplace, its number one purpose is not for friendship, okay? Because there's a bigger purpose into going into that office place. Having said that, back to my point earlier, why not be friendly and potentially make some friends in the working world? My father used to always say, still does, never go into business with friends. Never go into business with friends. And I know why he said that. And, you know, like with all things that your parents teach you when you're growing up, when you're young, you think they're wrong. And then you get a bit older and you're like, they were right. Because friendship comes with baggage. It comes with emotion. It comes with intention. It comes with all kinds of long-term investments into each other. And business can get in the way of that because there are tough decisions. You might one day have to fire your friend, and how rubbish is that? But I think to your point, 70% of people who spend 90,000 hours in work not having anyone that they are friendly with, well, no wonder we have a loneliness epidemic. Because you're spending 90,000 hours of your life, which is 5/7 of your week, with no friends.
Yeah.
So again, my question to the working world is, what have you got to lose? You don't have to invite them to your house and share Christmas together, or Ramadan, or Diwali, or Hanukkah, or any other occasion. But to be friendly, to share in things, to have someone to say, can we have a cup of coffee because today is really rubbish? You know, what have you possibly got to lose? And you have so much to gain.
I agree with you, but do you think it's also, yes, you've actually made a really good example that going in business with friends can create some complexity in terms of, at some point of time, because companies and businesses are going through flourishing times, and they tend to go through some tough times. And that's where you can kind of see how things are working in reality. Or maybe I'm wrong. Again, when they're flourishing, they're working in one way, and when they're at tough times, they're working in another way. So the question is, are our work environments and cultures that toxic that they actually prevent people from becoming real friends?
I don't know if it's the word toxic. I think the word toxic is trending. And I think, not to pick up only on that word, I know exactly the intention of your question, but I think today we are very quick to judge environments, people, or realities as toxic, when actually sometimes they're just complex. Yeah. You might not like it, but does that make it toxic? I don't know. Are our workplaces making it harder to have friends? Yes, I think so. Because the reality is, to build a relationship, any relationship, a friend or any other form of relationship, you need to be well. You need to be well enough to do that, to be able to listen. You need your prefrontal cortex to be activated. You need to not be in flight or fight mode, which is fundamentally an extended period of stress. Very hard to make friends when you are so stressed you can barely handle your own body. You're not really in the mood to invest into other people, right? Because in the end, you're trying to survive. So yes, if workplaces have really high levels of toxicity, of stress, of discomfort, of low psychological safety. And there was recent data, Lara, that shows that 52% of CEOs, the people who are responsible for culture, believe that their organizations are toxic. 52%. I mean, it's mad. Yes, that is going to interfere with our ability to build any relationships, friendly or otherwise, even between colleagues. But again, my point would be, what's the worst that can happen by trying? There is a chance, and it has happened to me, that you could make a friend at work and you fear the loss of that friendship if something in the organization changes, which is detrimental to one or the other of you. For example, a redundancy, or somebody gets fired, or whatever. It does happen. It can happen. You may lose that friend. But I also believe that we have friends for reasons and seasons. And sometimes a friend for a season, which is 2 years, 5 years in one organization, is enough. Why not? I mean, I'm sure every listener can think of a friend that they used to be really close to at work, maybe in their 20s or 30s or now, and no longer really see. But does that take away from the relationship that you had at the time? No. There was a reason to be friends. There was a season to be friends. Life moves on, and I think that's okay too.
I think it's just a question of bringing that awareness that it's okay to actually change the rules about friendship. And so how do you define friendship? Like, if you were to define friendship, how would you describe what it is for you?
For me, I think friendship is based in a shared trust of some form. And again, that could be very different. You know, you might grow up with someone who's known you for 30, 40 years. That trust is far deeper because they know your parents and your grandparents and, you know, many, many things about you. So there is a intrinsic trust. But if you have a friend, and I have one at my daughter's school, we go for coffee about once a month. I wouldn't say we don't share a huge amount of our life together. We have one coffee a month. We basically talk about our kids and life in Kuala Lumpur and the school and the endless list of WhatsApps and, you know, dress up and all the other things that mums have to handle. Are we friends? Yes. For an hour a month. And that's brilliant, right? There's a shared trust. I trust that she will come to coffee. I trust that we're going to have a good conversation. I trust her advice. She trusts mine. That's enough. So for me, friendship is a shared trust between two people that can take many other forms. And that's why I say that definition of friendship can be very wide. I think my biggest challenge, not that you asked, but I can tell you anyway, is friends between the sexes. Mm-hmm. I think this gets really complicated.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because as I travel the world, I have lots of gentlemen who I really, truly believe they are interested in being friends, kind of work friends.
Yeah.
They're interested in my topic and I'm interested in theirs. We share a view for the workplace or leadership. But of course, as a woman who travels alone a lot, you do have to be a little bit more aware of that. You know, yes, I can come to dinner, but as friends, right? That's what this is. You know, I have to be very clear.
Exactly.
You know, so there has to be a little bit more conscious thought, I think, around this shared trust transaction, which I'm defining friendship as, when it comes to different sexes within those friendship groups, right? I think sometimes you just have to have a little more clarity.
So you need to bring that in yourself. You need to initiate that clarity yourself. Is that what you're saying?
So. I think that in all areas of life, you have to speak the unspoken. Mm-hmm. In meetings, in friendships, in relationships, in all kinds of things. It's some advice I often give to people in the working world. Like if you're in a meeting and you can sense somebody's very frustrated, when you speak the unspoken, when you say, hey, Lara, I can tell you're extremely frustrated right now. How can I help overcome that? The minute you speak the unspoken, the thing that hasn't been said, it diminishes. So the earlier in a friendship that you say, I'm not comfortable with this, or can we clarify this? Or I just want to be really honest, this is what I'm hoping to get out of this. Does that work for you, Lara? It's out there. There's no area, there's no gray area for misunderstanding. And maybe because my life is so in so many time zones and there's so many pressures on me that are not my own, I can't control them always because there's other people telling me where to go or what train to get on or whatever. I really value that communication.
For sure.
I think it's really important. I think speaking up is really important.
I think also like listening to what you're saying about friendship and the way you kind of describe this shared trust or this created trust. I think a lot of people get stuck with making friends because they're looking for their friends to fix their feeling of loneliness.
Yeah, that's probably true.
And friends are not there to fix your loneliness. Friends are also people who want to connect from their side and also want to, you know, they also need energy, right?
Yeah.
It's an exchange of energies, right? And it has to be fair. So I think it's very important to understand and clarify that no one is there to fix the feeling of loneliness, as sad as it sounds.
Yeah, as we said earlier, you have to fix it yourself. I think no one can fix you in any way, just like you can't fix them. You know, often in the questions after my keynotes or workshops, people will ask me a question that is phrased somewhere around, how can I make them something? How can I make them happier? How can I make them listen? How can I make my boss less passive aggressive? And I always remind them, you can't make anybody do anything. All we have control over is our own choices, our own decisions in life. Can you create influence? Yes, and empathy is a great way to get there, by the way. But you can't fix your own problems through other people. And I think, not that we're talking about marriage, but it's a big topic that often in marriages that aren't working very well, we are looking for that partner to fix our own feelings. Number one, they can't. But number two, even if there's areas where they can help, you have to be able to express them what it is. And often we don't, to your point. Mm-hmm. So you get lonelier and lonelier in your relationship, thinking, why doesn't he ever? Why won't he just? Why isn't he? Meanwhile, you've never told him, right? So again, back to that shared communication and shared expectations. You know, people need expectation management. Children, people at work, friends. I think it's why emotional intelligence, why the ability to communicate, the ability to say things that are slightly awkward sometimes, but often are far less awkward when you say them, makes such a difference. So you have to communicate.
How do you see societies and, let's say, company cultures and in different countries, in different time zones, in different regions, how do they help people, and do they actually help people to overcome or to make it better? And some of them probably would make them worse. So do you see external factors actually helping, or it doesn't matter?
No, I think it definitely matters. I think culture has a huge, huge impact. Again, as we said earlier, there's many definitions of friendship. So there might be kind of very sort of shallow friendships, like, you know, me and my friend at work, at school. I'd say that's a shallow friendship. I really like her. I think she really likes me, but we just see each other once a month, and that's enough.
Distance, it's not super relationship, deep. Yeah.
It's just great. It's great for what it is, and that's fine. And culture has a huge impact on that. So if I think about Spain, for example, which is where my parents live, and I spent most of my life growing up on and off. In Spain, at around 6 or 7 in the evening, people traditionally, but still today, go for a walk. And they walk in the parks in the towns or cities, wherever they live. They take the grandparents and they take the children. And everybody walks. Like if you go to Retiro Park in Madrid around 6, 7 p.m, it's just families walking, older couples, families, children, babies in prams. So culture has a huge reality at how much you connect. Because if that is part of your culture, there is a routine. Every night you will see people in the park, and the chances are if you're in a smaller town, you're going to see the same people. And I think, yes, countries like India, countries like Sri Lanka, countries like Malaysia, that are very social in their structure, and religion has a big role in this as well. People gather in the same places. Maybe it's the mosque, for example, at certain times every single day. There is enforced, and I mean that in a beautiful way, enforced culture. There is enforced routine, there's enforced gathering of community for a certain reason, whether that is religion or routine or culture or practice. And yes, I think that makes a big difference. In many of our cities around the world, we have 48% of homes with sole dwellers. One single person living alone. 48% of a city all alone. That means you're waking up alone, eating breakfast alone, going to work alone, sitting in your booth, coming home, eating dinner alone, absorbing yourself in Netflix or a game, and going to bed alone.
But how do you think did that happen?
Modern life and all of its glory. You know, I think we're at this point in the social reality where we have more growth, more money, more opportunity, more technology, more variety, more consumption than ever before. And yet we have more mental health problems, more loneliness, more suicide, more isolation than ever before. So I think over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we have continued to move away from fundamentally what makes us human. We are meant to be together. When you look at the blue zones, which are the zones of the world with the highest number of centennials, so people that live to over 100 years old, in the top 3 reasons behind them living so long, belonging and connection is one of them. Villages where people go for a walk every day, they go to the same store every day. They know their neighbours and their neighbours' neighbours and, you know, their grandparents, cousins, uncles, friends. There is a social structure around that. As people have urbanised and moved away from their homes, gone to cities, gone abroad, you know, become focused on careers, they have less and less of that elusive time out of the house and away from their roots. It has become harder and harder to replace that, you know, because again, you having this enforced aloneness, not loneliness, that comes later, but forced aloneness. And in many countries, that comes with status. For many young people, living alone is something they're very proud of. They're very proud to tell their parents and their friends, I live alone. You know, I no longer live with a family. But in many cultures, that's not the case. In many cultures, staying within the family home, multi-generational homes in much of South Asia, for example, and Africa, is not just a norm, but it's celebrated. People want to live in a space with the grandparents and everybody else in the home. So culture has a huge amount to do with it. This kind of modern idea of successful living. I am successful because I have a penthouse at the top of a tower worth a few $1 million and I live in it all alone. If that's your definition of success, you know, have it. Mine is to live in a far lower condo, surrounded by people and filled with others all the time. But, you know, each to their own.
Do you think the friendship within the generation is somehow defined by what we actually established between the generation? What I mean by that, how do we teach our kids, you know, friendship? They do make friends at school.
Yeah.
But then we know it changes over life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for some it will stay, for some it will finish. It depends on the scenarios. It depends on the personalities as well.
I think it's about prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's about prioritizing the importance of those relationships. How often, probably, we, you and me and people listening, have cancelled on our friends because we have to work. Because the perception is, and perhaps the reality, that work is more important than friendship, right? That work is the most important thing. My boss has said, can I have lunch with him? So I've said yes to him rather than say, actually, can we do it tomorrow? Because I already have lunch with a friend. So I think prioritization is really important. I think acknowledgement of the power of those relationships is critical. And helping our children know that there are wonderful reasons to have some alone time. We often do that with our kids, right? We say, have some quiet time, read a book, you know, be alone and quiet. But also how important it is to have other people in our lives and to recognize what those relationships do for us and indeed our longevity. I mean, longevity is such a big discussion, but it is centered around supplements and triathlons and biohackers and stuff that we put in our blood to check on our oxygen levels. And those are all wonderful things. Technology is an amazing thing. But I also just want my daughter particularly to grow up knowing everything you need to survive, you already know. And friends, belonging, family, being connected is one of those key pillars. And I think we just have to keep reminding them of that. We have to have social emotional learning in schools. It's changing, it's coming. But we have to have that there because you're right. Otherwise we get very out of practice. And I think people turn around in their 60s and go, where did they all go? Where did all my friends go, you know?
Yeah, the friends are gone, the family is gone. You end up living on your own, and that's where the loneliness is coming, right? So you probably don't realize it until you really are left alone, right? And this is the society we created ourselves. So we want our children to mature. We want them to become grown up, to become adults, to take accountability, then start earning. And then we give them all the freedom to do so. And then this part of, you know, connecting to your parents, so just transferring that value of being connected to your parents and probably have some sympathy, empathy around that. That part is actually missing, right, in this fast moving world.
Probably. And I think, you know, for many parents, particularly in Asia Pacific, and I include the Middle East in that as a wider region, so much parenting, and I'm not judging it whether it's right or wrong, it's just a fact. So much parenting is about what the parents want for their children, on behalf of their children. And that is a wonderful, well-intentioned thing. But they are their wishes, not the children's wishes necessarily. You know, people who are on the gentle end encouraging and on the kind of harder end enforcing children to follow careers that they want them to follow because they perceive that as the right career or a safe career. And again, these are, I really want to be clear, these are well-intentioned actions. They are trying to protect them and set them up for success and more success than they had and all of these things, generational growth, everything. But when our children then become 18, 20, 22 and are suddenly able to make their own decisions, we then wonder why they don't want to hang out with us, right? Why they're so desperate to go and live alone in another city somewhere else. Because we have spent 18 years telling them what to do and what to think and what they should do and why they should do it and how they should do it and who they should be friends with. Then you shouldn't be friends with that girl. I don't like that girl. Why, mummy? I don't think she's good for you. What do you know about what's good for me in the playground when you're not there? Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't protect our children. That's our job. But at the same time, I think we should question, if we never allow our children to make any of their own empowered decisions, we should also then not question why they want to move away and leave us and the family unit behind when the last, 18 or 20 years has been more full of judgment than it has of freedom.
It makes me feel so, I don't know the word, not worried, but certainly very, very conscious about, things that I talk to with my children. So as we are approaching a big holiday season that is pretty global, right? And we are talking friendship today. We are talking connection. We're talking loneliness as well. So what would you say, what would you recommend to people to do to prepare, to get ready, to, to feel probably less lonely, to feel a little more joyful if they can?
I would say planning is your friend. So don't leave it too late. Don't leave it till, Christmas Eve, right? To wonder where you're going to spend your Christmas. I think planning is really important. And if you know you're going to be alone, for whatever reason, maybe you live far from home or you're not with your family, plan to be somewhere where there are other people. So that might be, if you are lucky and able to travel, you might want to travel to somewhere where you know there's other people. In your home city, you might just want to find where there are other events going on where you know that you can be connected to people. Or it might be, again, virtual. So it might just be to say, I want to plan for Christmas Day, for example, that, at 10 a.m. we're going to have a Zoom call and at 5 p.m. we're going to connect with grandma or whatever it is. Planning is your friend. Mm-hmm. If you don't plan and then people don't have time for you, again, that kind of victim mentality, it all goes back in our head. Oh, they're not thinking of me. They don't have time for me. They probably don't like me. They obviously don't love me as much. All of those things, right? It's probably none of those things. They're just busy in their own reality in another time zone. So the first thing I'd say is really plan for that. The second thing that we've touched on today is just to speak up and find other people in a similar boat. They are there, for sure. We just said at the beginning, 300 million people don't have a friend. That means in your city, in Dubai, wherever you live, even in your micro community, whether you're in Marina or Springs or Arabian Ranches or wherever you live, Barsha somewhere, there are people who are also alone, right? Find them and ask them. Even if they don't celebrate Christmas, and in a city like Dubai, there's many religions and cultures in one place. I've had friends say to me, listen, Mimi, I know you don't celebrate Ramadan, but would you like to come to our iftar and celebrate with us because it's important to us? And in the name of friendship and connection, we would love you in our home. So do the same thing. Ask your friends that are not necessarily of the same faith or don't celebrate Christmas what they're doing on Christmas Day. The chances are not much because they don't celebrate that day. So you can be with them.
Yeah.
But again, you have to speak up, right? You have to actually ask people to do that. And then the last thing I'd say is just look for what's going on in your town, in your city, in your area. Maybe there's a lunch. If you can't find anything that's very festive, without a doubt, there will be places you can volunteer. And I started there, a few minutes ago. Volunteering is a hugely powerful way to spend time and to spend the holidays. If you don't have your maybe expected experience, because for many of us, this is where the challenge is, right? The gap between expectation and reality is disappointment. So if your expectation is some festive, twinkly light, Santa Claus, mince pie, turkey day, and that's not likely to be your experience this year, don't set yourself up for that disappointment, that gap between expectation and reality. Find another way. That Christmas, at least for me, and I think for many others, is about joy. It's about giving. It's about togetherness. It's about the celebration of life. So find other ways to celebrate life and connect and give joy. Help people that maybe have less connection than you or are not well, or animals that could just do with having a nice walk and a hug, right? Find other ways. Do not give yourself the opportunity to fall into that disappointment, because in that disappointment is where loneliness grows. And as we've said a couple of times, avoiding that is your choice. And if anyone wants more advice or ideas, they can send me a message. I've got endless options for them. But I think that that's really important, taking responsibility and finding other ways to share joy. It is neurologically powerful to be together. It is proven that giving, being in service, sharing a purpose, creates oxytocin, makes you feel happy, the happy hormone in your body. So
happy coming holiday season, everyone. That was Mimi Nicklin with the Empathy Advocate, and we were talking loneliness today. And please take all the advices and get ready for the really joyful time.